This meeting is being live streamed. This is Willem and James's, or James and Willem's creative sessions.
Yes.
Willem
special
has a
guest of occasional with my mom sometimes coming in the background. Who's visiting?
Which is, I was about to say that. It's going to be inevitable,
sorry.
isn't it? No, it's good that you said it. I'm glad that we're going to have
it might not
a
happen, but it's also likely that it will. She's visiting for her 75th birthday.
A 75th or her 75th?
Her 75th. Her 75th.
75 years. I was at a 60th birthday yesterday.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was really good. It was a colleague, and it was a lot of fun. Although that inevitable thing started to happen where...
It's kind of funny as a comment. It's as a throwaway, I thought, well, not throwaway, but anyway, if an occasional, most people, we know that we have one relatively regular viewer, but that's about it, which I'm surprised by that we have one. But and it's funny. I noticed the other day that I said, because I was talking about something that I talked about in my podcast and said, well, it's kind of like I don't really have one anymore, but it's not true. I have this one, but I don't talk about it.
We probably
anyway,
should.
My point was, if a pupil of yours sees this, they get a whole other context on, wow, the teachers have a life. What do you... Maman, t'as pas besoin de faire ça. Non, ne fais pas ça, s'il te plaît, c'est très bizarre.
Don't do that, it's very weird. Is that what you said?
She started crawling on all fours, I think, to not be in the camera, and I said, just please don't do that. That's way more distracting that you watch.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's going to happen inevitably. Yes. But
well, no, I mean, walking on all fours was not necessarily going to happen for my mother. That was strange.
That's a little bit weird. That is a bit weird.
But my mom is a bit weird. My mom is a lot weird, but
that explains you.
Probably, yeah.
I think it
only half, because the other half comes from my dad.
Was he weird?
No. Although probably, like a lot of Dutch people, very, very serious and sensible outlook, but actually probably weird in the inside.
Is that what Dutch people are like?
They have that kind of streak of, I think, of coming out in all sorts of absurdity and weirdness. And I don't know. I'm just making this up. I don't really know.
Okay. Well, we can make it all up anyway.
Yeah.
Going to a 60th birthday reminded me that of the inevitable passing of time.
Yeah.
And seeing a lot of ex-colleagues who I hadn't seen for a long time reminded me of, wow, I'm number one, I'm older. Number two, I've been teaching a long time. Number three, I actually know quite a bit about teaching. It did make me feel better in some weird way.
You would hope. If you didn't, you could feel more sadder about the whole thing.
That's true. And
so it's good that at least you got some knowledge and experience and practical something after 20 years of experience.
It's going to be 20 years in September since I started being a teacher.
And you stayed in the same establishment, or you're like, well, no, you changed once, but you've been in the same for a long time though.
Well, as part of the teacher training, you do 2 placements, and I've been in the same school since like
it just blows my mind. Every time you tell me that, it blows my mind.
Why?
Because I haven't stayed anywhere like as an employee, and I probably won't be able to anymore. More than 3 years is my max, and that was 15 years ago.
Different worlds. You're an international man of mystery.
It's true. Not so much anymore. I mean, I've been in the same spot for nearly 4 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Stability. Interesting. Although the future...
the stand-up. I said I was going to talk about stand-up because we went to see stand-up comedy with my mom yesterday. And
your mom? Wow.
Yeah, with my mom. She wanted to see something funny. So I was like, we were talking about going to see a show, and that would be her birthday gift.
Okay.
And I visited in Paris, and we went out for champagne and drinks on Friday night after she arrived. And yesterday...
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was great. And yesterday she said, I want to see something funny. I want to laugh. I'm like, great, let's go see some comedy. And I like it. And to be honest, while I was looking for what was on in terms of shows, I saw that he was on, and I've been wanting to, so I kind of like drew the cover to my side a little bit, because I've been wanting to see that artist for a while. And he's an American who taught himself French and to do stand-up in French, and it's his second show that is on tour. And he was performing in a small theater, and he's also been hosting and organizing an English-speaking comedy night in Paris for the past 10 years. So I went to a couple of times to that, but he wasn't there. But this time he was. So I've been wanting to see him for a little while. He seemed to be quite funny. I'd watched a couple of his skits on YouTube, and I had a point. There was a reason why I was saying this.
Was it good?
What was it?
The future.
It was good.
Aging. Did he talk about future aging?
He definitely talked about aging and having kids. But the whole gist, a lot of the gist of this show was around the and I don't know how well that translates, because it works well in French. But he has a bunch of stuff that work well in French and in English, but others that are specific. I was admiring the fact that, like, well, to do stand up in another language that is not yours is quite amazing. And he does the work, and he produces stuff in English and in French. And he has some jokes and stories that work in both languages, but then he also has to readapt some stuff, because we stayed for the second part in English. So we reheard some of his bits.
So he did both? He did one French, one English?
He did one French show, a full hour, with a first person. And then he was hosting a lineup of comedians where he did a little bit, he produced it, did a couple of minutes or a minute between some of the sets. Mm-hmm. And there was an American, really good, experienced, fairly famous, but I didn't know him, to be honest. He has multiple Netflix specials. Have you heard of Tom Papa? I hadn't heard of him, but he is really, really good. So that was it was a treat, because this guy happened to be in Paris. His daughter was studying there, and he was on vacation, and contacted the host of the comedy night 48 hours in advance on Instagram, because he'd looked up what was going on and said, "Hey, I'm coming to Paris. Can I come and perform?" So it was a special secret guest, from 48 hours ago, and he was really good, really, 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 really good, very funny. And my mom and I, with my girlfriend, were on the first row, so we got to be part of the show. Yeah, I also kind of discovered that I'm perfectly a good sport, and we played with her, and it made my mom laugh a lot, and me laugh a lot as well, to be a little bit part of the show. Yep. My girlfriend not so much.
It's difficult to know.
And she's not really into stand-up in the first place. She's a tough crowd. She's a tough crowd.
God, it sounds like teaching.
Yeah, a little bit.
Tough crowd.
But the cicada and the ant, the fables of La Fontaine, is that something that rings a bell to you? The stories of La Fontaine?
No,
nothing, right? So the story, those are parables, fables, and they're very, very famous in French, Les Fables de La Fontaine, and they're taught to kids, and they're part of the.
Oh, they sound cool.
They're part of the culture. And they're all stories, usually with animals, with teachable moments about morality. And the cicada and the ant story is the cicada goes and plays all summer, plays his fiddle, wanders around, parties, and whereas the ant works, collects grain and all that stuff, and winter comes and the cicada has nothing, because the ant's worked hard. And while in the original story, basically, the cicada comes and knocks on the door of the ant, who asks, "Well, please, I'm starving and I'm cold. Can I have anything?" The ant says, "No, you should have worked before. Go fuck yourself." Sorry. which was also part of his joke, because he was doing the parable, and then he also readapts it a little bit. But he goes on with a running kind of thread through his show about we're all cicadas or ants. There's two categories of people.
Yeah.
We're all either the party goers. So he's like, you're all either free going, party enthusiasts, but really dumb, not very smart. The cicadas, or the ants, hardworking, thoughtful. You planning everything ahead of time. Those people. And then starts talking about his family that are mostly cicadas. Of course, he's I'm an artist, obviously. And he goes and has dinner at a family of ants who have done 10,000 things in the day, and he's like, "Well, the oven is ready," and whereas he's like, "I don't even know how to plan for cooking a frozen pizza, because I only read the instructions one line at a time, and I get frustrated." He's like,
Oh,
It
very
says
good.
pull out the pizza and leave it out for 10 minutes. It's like, all right, fine, but I'm hungry now. I want it. Okay, fine. He goes, comes back 10 minutes later, reads the second line. Preheat the oven for 15 minutes. Damn. And
And is this in English or French?
that's in French, but it also works in English,
Wow.
right? Because
It
it
does.
makes
It
you
works
laugh.
both ways. It works really well.
But what doesn't work in English, though, which I'm only realizing telling you now,
Yeah.
is the whole thread of the show about the cicadas and the ants. So you would have to rechange and find another
Yeah.
reference in English that would
Yeah,
work, which
you
is
would.
probably possible. But it's again admiring the amount of work to do both languages.
It's impressive. It's interesting how the stories that universal, of course. I'm thinking of I suppose the tortoise and the hare, but it's not quite the same.
No, but it is because that's the fable of La Fontaine.
What, really? The tortoise and the hare is
Yes, it is.
that's his.
I'm
Or
pretty
theirs.
sure. Well, I'm pretty sure.
Because
Wait, I
I
have a
love
doubt now.
things like that. There's this I'm reading The Alchemist with my form at school, and
Shh, maman, ne fais pas ça.
they're
Sorry.
that's all right. The
No, sorry.
and
The tortoise and the hare is Aesop's fables. Sorry.
yeah, that's
Not-
Aesop's Fables is the ones.
But it's
that
the same
I'm
idea,
familiar-
same kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
but I would like to read some of the French ones, even if they're translated, just to get
I'm sure
a
they
feel
are.
for the.
I'm sure they
the-
are. And so the
Culture.
cicada and the ant is one of the most famous enough that funny enough, and just right now she did it again. On the metro, on the way to the show, my mom started actually telling, which I had no idea she knew, but she must have learned it at school, by heart, the fable. She started telling it to my girlfriend because it rhymes and stuff. So
Oh wow! So it's got a kind of sing-songy, kind of rhythmic feel to it. Cool. Stories.
She might have been talking about the tortoise and the hare, but no, she also went about the cicada and the ant just before the show without knowing that it would be the content of the show. And she just started saying it right now. And I said, don't do that, because I asked her to not speak while we were recording.
It's good luck herding cats.
Oh yeah, totally. But I just
But it's distracting. It's hard. So we were also going to talk about the future. I thought that the stand-up comedian was going to say something about the future.
the future.
That was
no, and now I'm sorry. I think that I made a thread that wasn't the one I wanted to make in the first place, and that's one of the things
I know. That's what
my mom does
laugh.
all the time, and I'm like her.
You had a point you wanted to make, and then went off different. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about.
It'll come back.
I'm sure it will. Those French fables. I'm not interested in those. But Tim, you sent me. I don't know if did we say this? Did I talk about Tim Urban already, or was that
Not
live
yet.
or not live?
No, not live.
Not live. Okay. So you sent me that link that he was doing and Ask Me Anything on Reddit.
Yes.
And I just bought his book because
I pre-ordered his book immediately as soon as I got the email from him saying the book was out, because I knew of the series of posts that it relates to that I didn't finish reading, and that I didn't realize he hadn't even finished writing, and instead he rewrote them into this book.
Okay.
I read the long posts that I don't know if you came across it. I might have sent it to you. He wrote a long post about how he wrote the book, and that
that's cool.
He started writing a post like 6 years ago. He was like, I think I should write about this, the state of American society, and how it seems like there's more division and more people like two sides angry at one another. And he went down a big rabbit hole. And he started as he thought it might be one piece that's going to be a little bit of a bigger blog post, ended up being a huge series of books. But he took 3 years to publish his first, because he started reading about a lot of topics, about society, about sociology, about science, about all sorts.
You're talking about posts or his book?
Yes,
the
both. Both.
Because he's only written one book, right?
No, yes, but the whole story is that he started the book that just published now.
Yeah, right.
Started out as one post because he was interrogating himself on the state of like American society and society in general and divisiveness and what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And he went down a really big rabbit hole. And then 3 years later, and he describes the rabbit hole he went down to in that post that talks about the process. He started publishing a series of long posts called The Story of Us, as in he started rationalizing and organizing thinking around society and human beings and how it's built. And he wrote over end of 2019 and 2020 about like 8 huge posts that I didn't finish. I read only the first 2, I think. Sorry. And then he stopped the series, and because it was every one of the new posts were becoming like twice the length as longer than the previous. And the first post in this series takes like an hour to read, and then the others take longer.
Oh my gosh.
So he stopped, or 30 minutes at least, and then up to an hour for later ones. And then he found he didn't conclude them. He got stuck on like the overarching thing, the conclusion, went back into a rabbit hole. Also, there's a whole the timeline of the story also goes against his organizing his marriage. And in the first place, he'd said in 2016, I'm going to have my book written by the time we get married. And then there's all sorts of personal stuff that happened in between, but there's no book. And then he rewrites everything into this book. And so it took over 6 years altogether. So he takes a lot of the content from the posts that are published, but they're actually kind of drafts for the book that was written in the end. So he reorganizes a lot of ideas. In the end, he's like, I'm just going to write a book. And he says that before the end of the post, he's like, I have everything. I'm going to publish a book. And then he goes into another rabbit hole for 3 years to reorganize everything. And actually, now he's just published it. So I'm really looking forward to it, but I have not started reading it. I've been completely stuck on my video game, and I've not been reading anything of my books in the last month, which is very unusual. The last 3-4 years I haven't done that.
Is this the role-playing?
The triangle strategy.
Game?
Yeah.
Triangle strategy, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still kind of upset. And I've had to put it down a little bit because I'm obsessed, and also because I had work to do, which I procrastinated as much as possible.
Of course. But
I ended up having to work yesterday because there were things I hadn't done during the week. Not at all because I hadn't been playing, although maybe.
So you're definitely not an ant. Definitely not an ant.
Well, my first reaction to this show is I'm definitely a cicada. However, there are some things that I do plan in advance and organize. But overall, because we're probably not just one or the other.
No, exactly.
Although generally there are trends, I think I'm more of a cicada, but there are things where I do plan. But generally, mostly I just do what I want. I don't. I do plan for trips. Anyway, I have some streaks of being a little bit organized, but
I think we're both. I think everybody. That's what's so cool about fables like that. They illustrate like some part of humanity that we can all identify with, because we've all got that within us, both of us.
True.
Although both those characters. But I'm looking forward to reading Tim Urban's. Now, you were working your way through his career post, weren't you?
We did. I remembered because I actually was thinking about him when I saw the Reddit Ask Me Anything, and I pulled out his post about career that we worked through on some of our Teaching Tangents episodes, which I want to circle back to. And I also sent to my girlfriend because she's also thinking about her career, and I think the post will likely be quite useful, or it might be. I think there's some really useful stuff and exercises, and you might enjoy doing them. But because I want to look at it again because I'm also thinking about that.
You're really thinking quite seriously about the future, what it might be.
Yeah, I am.
What can you create?
But I've done this stuff before, so I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it's different when you're with someone. You know, there are plenty of things that
Oh, it is, of course, but
it's.
But sorry, what did you want to say?
I was going to say, sometimes it's great being with someone. Sometimes it's just a pain in the. Just like it'd be so much easier if everybody thought the way I did. But
I'm not. Okay, sorry. Did you have something that happened in that realm recently?
It's that push and pull, that tension that makes life interesting, but also really challenging. Because I will think things through. Davina will change her mind at the drop of a hat, at the drop of a thought, at whatever she's saying to every, like, whatever. And then somehow it works. Somehow we make it work. But there are times where I'm thinking, I'm right, so you should listen to me.
Is there
And
an
I'm sure
example that you can talk about, or that's not particularly, super private or whatever?
Maybe okay, so we were going to the party yesterday, right?
Mhm.
And it was a surprise party, and we had to be there before 7:30.
Right.
And she goes, right, we'll leave by 6:45 to allow enough time. I'm like, fine, no problem. I'm downstairs. We leave at like 7 because
Yeah,
she
but
was
it's funny. What's funny is
doing makeup.
how stereotypical of very like old school stereotypical comment from a guy about his wife.
I know. Well, I didn't suggest the time. She did. So she said it, and then she was doing makeup.
Whereas I do both. I say, well, just yesterday to go to the show. We were not late, but we were running a little bit off schedule, and I put the schedule together, said at what time we needed to leave, and and had us leave a little bit later. In broad strokes, and then was a bit stressed during the way.
But then, is that why you end up on the front,
missed the bus
row?
by a minute? But I also have to.
Is that why you ended up on the front row?
Yes.
It's a risk. It's a risk.
Well, our choice was because there was a few people before, and it was a small room, and with no like backs to the seats. It was just benches. Basically.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah,
yeah.
But so that's an example of like
and I wasn't too bothered about the first row. I was a little bothered that it was too low for me. So I had to like raise my head and be in an uncomfortable situation.
Because you were so close to the front.
Yeah, and so I had to look up at the artist. It's a small room, so. But it was good. It was fine. It was fine. So it was either the first row or the sides, and a small room. And I thought, okay, we'll just go to the first row. It's fine. Anyhow, it was all good. We were 10 minutes early, but everybody was queuing outside. And we would arrive like a few minutes earlier. We might have had a little bit more choice of seats, but it's really not a big deal. So.
Yeah. So this is the point about the building. I think this whole thing about the future also relates to building something together. There's something really cool about creating stuff with somebody together, sharing experiences together.
I know we're gonna talk about. Sorry, I'm interrupting. Sorry.
It's but the point I kind of want to round off with is that it's a qualitatively different experience when you're with someone creating something together or building a life together. It's so different
than doing it yourself.
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, probably, but there's also, I mean, at the same time, right now, what's interesting is it feels just more of it insofar as I'm questioning a lot of things, and she is too. So none of the two have any more answers than the others. So we're just kind of like, we want to spend more time talking about it. And there's this things, well, they're not this weekend because my mom is visiting. So hopefully we'll have time next weekend. But I have a lot of things that, and I also know myself, and because we've had these conversations, anybody watching this is probably not going to watch the same amount of hours that we've done, but you never know. But I know myself I have these kinds of recurring questions all the time. So I'm always wondering about what's next, about what I want to do, about etc. But on the larger scale, the things I'm seriously thinking about at the moment from a future perspective are, do I want to stay in a large city in Paris? Because I have one side of me that's really strongly thinking, I don't see myself here in 10 or 20 years. I'd really like to go somewhere else and probably in the countryside or in the south of France or somewhere else. I don't know. I mean, I have ideas because I also have a strong streak that's like, well, where am I going to go? I mean, I'm going to go close to where my siblings live, or maybe somewhere else for another reason. But why? Just why would I mean, I need to have some kind of project. But It could be a ski resort because I love skiing, or mountains, or near-ish mountains. But there's also a whole side of me that's like, well, reasonably, and that maybe you could bring it back to the adventure cicada or reasonable ants. The reasonable is like, well, I'm a city dweller. I've always been living in a city, so maybe it's just a romanticized notion to go live in the countryside. But the things that I don't like anymore, that I don't like so much, and where I don't see myself on the long run, is the way I choose to live my life, and what I tend to enjoy about how I live my life doesn't really work with the standards of a large city. I'll explain myself. What I mean by that. No, it's because it's not true what I just said, but you can, of course. What I mean by that is I have been here for nearly 4 years, partly down to the pandemic, but partly down to just the way I was working before. I have very little or lack of success, perhaps. I don't know. All the work I have is the vast majority is online with clients that are not necessarily in Paris, and not thanks to having developed a professional network in Paris. The only in-person work I do mostly is my classes and occasional meetings with clients, and I try to do a bit of networking, but I don't really have time or lack of interest, and I have enough work coming in anyway. So my work is not dependent on where I am, really. And otherwise, it costs a lot of money to maintain a certain lifestyle in Paris.
Yeah.
Like in any big city, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have a regular 9 to 5 or regular contract job, which would ensure me to have enough to save and get by in Paris. Now, of course, there are a lot of freelance and independents in Paris. And Paris could be another big city, but this is where I am right now. And you have the notion that you need to be here to get the work. But actually, if I look at all the work I have, I don't really have it because of my contacts in Paris. I have it because I'm active online. And since the pandemic, there's even more stuff about remote working. And I was doing that before anyway, or to a certain extent. In Chicago, I was working directly with my clients, but for that's where I come to lack of success, either from budgets or lack of success or lack of contacts in Paris. I could have a lot more work and contacts in Paris. I just don't. But the fact that I don't also makes me think, well, it doesn't really matter where I am. I could live somewhere with that costs less. That's on one hand. And do I see myself living here in 20 years? And I have enough to pay my rent in Paris, but because I've had the opportunity to look at buying my apartment and looked at buying property, I don't have enough, and I don't have a situation that allows me to get a mortgage. I can't.
Yeah.
And even if I could, would I want to? Well, I couldn't get a mortgage for this kind of money. When you're easily like, well, if I can't do that here, again, is it why do I want to be here? And what I meant by the lifestyle is I usually like to have more time and work less, whereas living in a large city I don't have the family money or anything, so it means that I have to work. Now, I managed to do it in a way that I have enough experience, so I don't have to, I work a lot, but I don't have to, I can't afford to have independence and freedom with my life and way of working.
Like the feast and famine thing of being a freelancer.
Well, that's the consequence. I have the feast and famine thing, but I mean, I can manage my own calendar. I have a lot of work to deliver for clients, and I have a class to teach on Tuesday. So I worked yesterday to make sure I'm ready for my class on Tuesday. Tomorrow, I know I have to work for long and probably late to deliver my work for the client for Tuesday morning. But I also know that my mom is visiting, so I've had her organize other things. And Wednesday, however, I can organize my schedule so that we can go and have lunch together and go see an exhibit or a museum or something like that. So all that to say that Friday I could easily organize my schedule so that I can take a nap and do other things, put them off to Saturday. I mean, I can reorganize everything so that I have quite a lot of freedom in the way I spend my time. I don't have to be in an office. I don't have anybody calling me. I don't think I could deal with that anymore. I would have a hard time dealing with, I had coffee with a friend who was working, replacing somebody on maternity leave in a big company, very large company, very known, famous brands, etc. And she talked about the ambiance and the atmosphere. And there's a recurring, it's stereotypical, but there's a recurring thing I've heard of a lot of big companies and agencies in Paris that there's recurring themes of complaints that happen everywhere that I've heard about London and Chicago and New York, etc. But there's also ones that are particularly dire for Paris, that the atmosphere is particularly nasty, let's say,
Right.
of more backstabby, more
Wow.
people that are kind of trying to one up each other on the corporate ladder, and that kind of stuff, that what I'm not particularly interested in, and more traditional old school. Now, it's not the case everywhere. There's also like more modern and more there's great people, of course, but overall the trend seems to be towards very conservative, traditional, be there on time, why you're not there, and all the way to silly things like I was told of examples of people you're supposed to work with disinviting you from meetings and then telling you off about it to other people. I was listening to this going, really? This seems like schoolyard silly things when you're 5.
Well, yeah.
But apparently that happens a lot around here.
It's listening to you talk about that world reminds me of bullshit jobs.
Totally. So I don't want to have that. And then all of that is also the other large line of thinking is my future, as in, okay, well, do I want to do feast or famine freelance consulting forever? Like, well, I enjoy doing it when I'm doing it for a client. Like the work I have to deliver right now for my client that I talked about on Tuesday is really interesting when you dive into it. But talking about my industry, talking about what I need to do is less and less interesting to me. I haven't written about it, and by the way, I haven't written anything. And then more and more I think about, well, I think I'd like to create my own business, but again, I also wonder or worry if it's a romanticized notion, but I think I'd like to do that. But I also now have conversations to, of course, now talk about it with my girlfriend, because now we're 2.
This is really interesting about the romanticized notion of starting your own business, or like
and I am running my own business, but to do something different than consulting in the communications industry.
But the other thing that comes across from what you're saying is the interest getting less and less in this particular industry. Is like in being at this 60th yesterday, there were a lot of ex-colleagues there who were, a few of them said the phrase, "So you haven't escaped yet," implying
I was wondering about ex-colleagues. I had a question about that.
So when they're asking me, "Have you haven't escaped yet?" they're implying like you don't want to leave. You've been here for like so long. Do you not want to do something else? Do you want to
which blows my mind too. Yeah.
And I was like, well, actually, no. I really like being a teacher.
And so these people what have they become? Have they changed careers? Have they just changed jobs as teachers, or they're teachers somewhere else? Or
they've changed jobs as teachers.
Okay.
So they're still teachers, but at different places.
Yeah.
So there's kind of none of them. It's a good question actually, because I don't think any of them changed careers. Some have retired, but none of them changed careers.
No, changing careers is a big deal.
Oh yeah. But I don't know how many of them changed careers to become a teacher, which is what I did.
Right.
So and I think that makes me a better teacher, because
I would tend to agree, and yeah, for sure. I would still want to use everything I've learned in whatever business I do, but apply to a business and building my own brand rather than advising others about theirs.
Which does remind me about your experiments with chili sauce.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that it would be. Anyway, in the meantime, I'm certainly experimenting with making chili sauce. But yes, making food is one of the areas of thinking. The likelihood also, but on the other hand, is funny, is that I know, it's likely, probable, that if I did go and leave to the south of France, for example, and to build a new business, my disposable income will be a lot less than what I have in Paris, even though I still feel that in Paris it's not enough to fully enjoy Paris. I do pretty much what I want, but I'm also regularly strapped for cash, either because of feast or famine, or also because I make a lot less than if I had a full-time job. I make a lot less than if I had a full-time job, but I work less hours and I rearrange them differently as well.
Yeah.
I have a lot more of the freedom. But I
you
have enough to get by in Paris, but not enough to buy somewhere, and not enough to have, season theater tickets or something else I'm making up. Of course, I went to the theater yesterday, and this is where we're on the same page with my girlfriend, looking at the moment at some of the expenses we've got coming up and some of the trips and going, okay, well, do we want to do anything for Easter? But no, because it's going to be expensive. And actually, May has bank holidays as well, but we're kind of thinking, okay, we'll just take it easy, not spend too much money because we don't, well, we of course we can spend money, go out for drinks, etc. But going on a night out, and particularly with inflation, and inflation, I talked about that. I was jury on a student thing on Friday morning, and I started noticing the prices of things, like in the UK, where I was like, wow, this is now very expensive, or deciding not to buy things because now they're too expensive.
What's inflation in France at the moment?
Well, I don't know what the general percentage is, but it's like 10-15%, depending on what the food's gone up, not as badly as in the UK, but the food's gone up.
Yeah.
A lot of the price of bread, and that's what we were talking about with the students, because they had a brief on a bread a professional association.
Yeah.
The standard price for a baguette in a boulangerie has gone, for the ones that hadn't before, have gone from €1 base to €1.20. So it's a 20% increase.
Wow.
But then and things are expensive where I am in the center of Paris. Also, they're more expensive than elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. The place where I usually go and do my just standard groceries, not the big shop because it's a bit of a smaller shop, but like the sort of small to mid-size city Sainsbury thing. The butter I buy, which is it's an organic butter, but store brand organic butter. Okay.
Yep.
Went from €2.35 to now €4.10.
Whoa.
Not in one go, but I just noticed
but it just
back from holidays, and I was like, wow, now this is a lot. And I have to stop shopping at that one and go to the one that's like 5-10 minutes walk further, that's bigger and a little bit more affordable price-wise.
Oh man, it does make it real when you talk that kind of stuff. The
and
question
that's what I was
ask...
talking with the students, and I talked about that with a friend in common of ours. And when you have less money, or that's people are squeezed, if they have the same salary, they're feeling it big time.
If you moved out of the city to wherever, South France, whatever, and would the cost of living be different? It would, right?
It would be very different.
Would you?
Well, still... I mean, it would be different in many ways. Less, but also different. Not necessarily all less.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's still a thing about opportunities. The thing that I'm brought back is I earn a lot more still than my siblings, or I have a lot more opportunity to earn, but I still have the stress of I don't know where the next thing's coming from. But when it does come, I earn a lot more in one go than they do, but they have very different situations. They're just very, very different situations. And my older brother is again in a very different situation because he's back in a full-time job, very well paid, so he has a lot of cash. No, I don't know how much. Of course, he has family and kids, etc. It's just the trend, right? Yeah. Such as I would have that if ever I had a full-time job. Now, nobody's giving me one, but I also quite strongly think that it's likely that I would be unhappy. Yeah. Now, I think you told me, or somebody told me, I think it was you. What if you found a job that you were happy in? I'm like, well, I hadn't really thought about that, but also it's possible. But it hasn't happened. I've had zero opportunity for that. All the rare interviews I've had have gone nowhere. I'm not getting in response to my CV, and I have a lot of ideas about how it's not really what I want. Yeah. Anyhow, so I don't know if this makes for any good content, or it's not really the tone of conversation we usually have, but.
No, it's not. It's quite serious.
Sorry, it's a lot more serious, but also just like spewing a lot of stuff that I have on my mind, which I'm not sure I've talked about with you recently anyway.
No, but it makes, I don't know, there's definitely been hints of it, but I think it makes sense when, if I'm thinking about my future, or we're thinking about our future, given the state of the world, and we're thinking about what's next for ourselves, it is very natural to be thinking about everything you've just said. Everybody is thinking about this kind of stuff.
And there's also fascinating other sides of these topics. So, example, south of France. My sister, who makes wine, is agriculture, is extremely worried, and she's not the only one. And there's there's protests and stories going on in France about this, about water, lack of.
Really?
Yeah. So she lives in the south of France in a very, very dry place where they've started. So I don't know if you know this, but we're in the middle. No. We're at the end of one of the worst winter droughts in Europe in I don't know how long.
I did hear about this. Like rivers drying up and stuff.
Which is definitely having and going to have. We'll see what happens next with the weather. What on agriculture?
Yeah.
On the harvest and the crops and everything.
Yeah.
And there's four areas of the south of France where they already last month started making giving how do you call that rationing the water and limitations. So they said, well, no swimming pools, that's for sure. You just have to stop watering your gardens and stuff like that in March.
Wow.
And Saskia, so my sister is thinking of, now she's okay, but the yields that she's been setting, she's celebrating her 10th anniversary of her wine domain. Ever since she got there, the yields are lower and lower, and she has a bunch of other problems about drought out in the south of France. And they live by a river that's like running nearly dry at the moment, at the end of winter.
My immediate question is like, why? Why has that happened? Is it climate? Is it?
Well, there are general. So I don't know overall, but I will give some general. So there's some that is definitely due to climate change as a macro perspective.
Right.
Some that is just unlucky and just it's a winter drought. It happens. So that's why I said I don't know, because it's not much of an answer. Meanwhile, California has been in a massive drought, and they've had the record snowfalls in the last month and a half, like huge. So all the ski resorts have got more snow than ever, whereas they had years and years and years of drought.
In English, drought, yeah.
But overall, we're emptying the water planes. There's been massive protests last weekend in the west, southwest of France, I think. Where they're planning a very controversial installation that they're calling the mega vecine. They're mega
dam
water bowls sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's like it's just kind of like picking up all the rainwater and isolating it. So rather than letting the water reintegrate the earth and nature and to go within the what's it called in English, the underground water.
The water table is how high.
The water table is very low. So rather than letting the water table naturally go and irrigate the whole earth, is kind of like squeezing it to the side, and to have that water dedicated to industrial agriculture. So to pick water off and reserve it for electric which all the environmentalists are going nuts, and a lot of agriculturists as well.
Yeah.
And the French government had like a massive show of police. There are a lot of people hospitalized. There was a big fight in the middle of the countryside for what was originally a peaceful protest. But anyway, we also have problems of the French government is arguably being very heavy-handed with police, anyhow, sorry, that's it's a lot serious, a much more serious conversation than I think we were going for. Sorry.
Well, we'll transition to something less serious in a second, but the interconnected. What listening to you, it just reminds me how interconnected everything is, and as much as we try and, in my opinion, as much as the profit motive drives so much of the negative behavior that we see about like big agriculture, big pharma, what the because we would have to make more money and control everything, rather than living at least in some awareness of what nature's given us. The moment you try and mess with one tiny bit, we have no idea what the huge effects are going to be.
And from a bullshit jobs perspective,
exactly,
the overall
that's
thing
exactly
is
what I was
it's like I want to be part of at least somewhat be closer to being part of something useful and a solution, rather than feeling like I'm part of the problem, consulting for big capitalistic firms on how to make more money and how to find insights about people on social media or on, which is really engaging for my brain, but it's not that, it doesn't,
that
doesn't
was
help.
Way back when I was 25. That was the thought that I had. Like, what am I really doing working for a media planning and buying agency as a data planner, as I was at the time? I was getting people to buy stuff they don't really want with money they don't really have. That was
funny enough, I did the opposite when I was 25. Because, partly I was really, at the time, I got into digital because I was excited about all sorts of possibilities with digital technologies and communications, and still remembering the cool ads I saw when I grew up, and still today. I think there are not that many of them, of course. There were never, I don't think, that many of them. But the idea of creating that seemed cool, and I really liked it. And
then now, of course, as a teacher, I question the school's part in the providing cogs for a very big capitalistic system that just.
But you work for a private.
What am I really doing? What difference am I really making? I work for a private school, and more in the UK, we have something called academies, which are they're basically companies that get money from the government, straight from the government, to administer and run schools how they want. And they're not private schools because they're not run for profit, but what's happening is that academies are buying schools and then putting together as in effect a brand to actually provide education, service providers to the government. It's like government contracting. And of course, it's the ultimate free market theory that, if the government allocates the money to companies, then they're going to provide a better service because they want to do really well and they're dependent on our money. But
they won't provide better education because it's not in their interest most of the time.
Exactly. And
not from a purely market capitalistic perspective.
It's
I mean, I work for a private school, and I know I'm only teaching a few classes, so I'm not involved in that. So I overheard a little bit of this type of stuff. It's a part of a big company that owns like 12, I think, schools.
Yeah.
Their interest is how to get more registration, more enrollments of paying students for the next fall. And then they have all the faculty are fighting to try to provide good education. Fighting for is perhaps exaggerated, but there's a struggle. It's not like it's integrated within the whole means of the company to say that, okay, our company is going to make money by providing great education. No, you have a whole part of the staff that are more of the admin sales type thing that are just looking at the numbers. And then you have another part of the faculty. And by the way, it's not just the private companies, because David Graeber talks about that in Bullshit Jobs in the admin of all the schools and universities.
Yep.
And then you have a part of presumably faculty that are there struggling to their corner to argue for the quality of the education and what they need to be able to provide it.
Now, there were strikes in the UK in state schools, which does include academies, about the pay scales. Now, we're a private school, so we couldn't go on strike because the dispute was about pay, and our pay scales in a private school are different. Now, the more I think about it, the independence of a private school to run its own finances and do things the way it wants and provide a focus on education is in some ways better than the huge academies that get their money from the government that are just trying to buy loads and loads of schools and do everything in the same way.
Maybe.
It's totally arguable.
Possible.
Totally arguable. Possible. But it
depends on the school.
It completely depends on the school, and it completely depends on how the academies view things. Now, Bullshit Jobs was such a great way of describing this whole thing. And of course, like, I question it now, like, what do I do as a teacher? What am I really doing? And so it's that's part of the reason I'm really interested in doing my masters. I've been exploring. Do you know about Bash? Do you know what Bash is?
I think you might have mentioned it before, but tell me.
Bash is like, you had a computer like a Spectrum, you said, didn't you?
No, you had one. I
No,
didn't
I had
have
an
one
Amstrad.
until I
What
didn't
did you
have
have?
one. I didn't have one.
You didn't
I
have one
played
at all?
my friend's Amstrad and Commodore 64, but I didn't have one. I didn't have one.
So you have a PC with DOS? You remember that?
That I played on. We also had like computer class on. Were they Amstrads? Possibly.
Nimbus maybe was the other big brand in the
At
UK that
school.
provided schools.
But anyway, I got my first PC much later, much later.
So the Bash looks like DOS with a command prompt, but you can do loads of. This is going to sound so
you
nerdy.
mentioned we talked about this before.
We might have. You can do loads of cool data stuff in Bash, right? And Bash is also a base for using R and Python and SQL. So I'm playing around with this stuff, playing around with a data. I'm following a course I found online, and there's a 7 million line data set of that's available in the public domain of flight details in the US, and I'm using it to practice manipulating data using a program, and I'm beginning to write scripts that can be set to run themselves and do all this cool stuff. I love it. I'm really excited.
I never got into that. Really, that's cool.
And that's what I'm going to be.
Never. I did a tiny bit of it for websites back in the day, a long time ago. I did a little bit of frontline coding to make websites.
So I'm interested in that because what that's gonna build into my masters. But then, like you said to me, if I do the masters and I get really into data analysis, data kind of playing with the whole thing, then why would I stay a teacher? Would I change careers again? Maybe. It's who knows, and who knows. I can imagine us having this conversation in 3 years' time. Like, yeah, remember that time in 2023 when we started talking about Tim Urban's book and the future?
That's where we started. I'm looking forward to reading the book,
and I'm looking forward to it too, because I feel like he'd be such a cool guy to just hang out with. Probably. I feel like you just have a drink with him and just chat rubbish, but it would be cool. I think like he'd just get on with all of us. He's that same kind of. How old is he? He's the same age as us.
I guess.
I think he must be in his 40s. And I'm also then kind of jealous about how he's written a book and made money from a blog that he just writes random stuff about, and then got to do
that's where I feel talk. Like rather than me doing nothing and hanging around and playing video games, I should do a lot more. But anyway.
So the other thing that you did put in the description to transition something a bit more fun.
None of that. I was just thinking that none of what we said in the description is what we're talking about. But anyway.
John Wick 4.
Yes, that was so good.
Paris. You
so
said
good. And it was very, very funny. The whole scenes in Paris were fantastic and completely unhinged.
Unhinged is the word.
Oh my god, the whole movie is, to be honest, like really, really crazy. It's so good. I felt like how not up to par the third one is, and in comparison, it was fun. The third movie of John Wick, but in comparison with the fourth one, it feels the third one they should have just mixed the third and the fourth together and just like.
I don't know because.
But maybe I should watch the third one again anyway.
We rewatched 1, 2, and 3. So one.
That one I rewatched a couple of times, and I saw it with my girlfriend last year.
Feels very much about him.
Yeah.
2 just expands a bit more with the whole idea of the marker and all that kind of jazz. 3, I thought, set up for, because you were then familiar with this whole hierarchy and the coins and was making the coins, and he's just like whatever. But 4, oh my god. But you're
talking about the story, which are fine. It's kind of interesting, that universe a little bit, but that's not why you watch it.
No, and there were 2 things that happened.
You watch it for the really crazy fights and people shooting at one another like at this range and going like this because they're.
because they've got super amazing jackets. But I don't only watch it for the fights. I do watch for the fights and some of the technicality of the martial arts I really enjoyed breaking apart,
Which is
especially
still
some
the fights,
moves.
I'm sorry,
But it's not. I was like, it's about him. I wanted to know. So there's a few bits, right? There was some times where I was literally sitting on the edge of my seat, literally on the
it
edge
was
of my
so
seat.
good. I
But
really
then,
felt again, and I felt like sorry, go ahead.
then the other thing was, I thought, this is a computer game. This is a video game. I'm watching a video game. I'm watching
Pretty
someone
much.
play through somebody as John Wick, and they've mastered all the moves, and it just looks really cool. I think it does set a new standard for action films. The part where he goes into that building in France, and then it zooms up, and you're like,
oh my god, that's crazy.
So like, well done.
That was really crazy, and that was very video game like, yeah, for sure. I had the distinct impression watching this one, and I'm pretty sure I had the same watching the third, maybe the second, which is quite entertaining to have the strong impression that everybody is playing around him, because he's so underacting, and he speaks almost no words, and of course he's doing a lot.
Yeah.
But it feels like from a performance as actors, all the others are really playing, and he's kind of just there. Still fine. And I don't know how to express this. I'm wondering if, like, is it because Keanu Reeves is not such a great actor, or is it because he is great, or is it the character that's like that? But I think it's all a bit of both,
I think it's all of those. And he looks amazing. Like, I want to be like, I want to look like that when I'm that old. He's nearly, is he 60 now? He's
Probably.
coming for, he's definitely late 50s. Like, just, and he seems really cool about it. He's not being ridiculous, like, about, I'm a thespian.
It was Osaka, by the way, the Continental Osaka in Japan.
Yeah.
Really, because you were not sure last week which city it was in.
Oh, it was Osaka.
Osaka is so good. Those scenes are fantastic as well.
I know.
And Paris is...
Yeah, the bit around the Triomphe.
It's very entertaining. And it was very entertaining to be in Paris in a full room and a big screen with everybody kind of chuckling at like how ridiculous it is what they're doing when we know how Paris actually is.
Yeah.
But the fact that they live in this world with this marquis, which is also entertaining to hear a Swede with a French accent.
Yeah.
Which was we're like, that was kind of, most people were like, what the fuck is that kind of accent? That's funny. But going to the Louvre and having a private meeting, the private meeting in front of the Eiffel Tower that is normally full of tourists, but they still have a few pigeons there. That and all set up. It makes it really great and over the top silly. And of course, which was great from a like landmarks perspective, but to have him go from one step to another that makes no sense from a geographic standpoint. Do you like, why would you go one if you're under the river, like you can't, and you're dropped off at the Eiffel Tower? That is not the closest point to Montmartre whatsoever.
No.
And at all. But okay, sure, why not? And it's also even more entertaining because the bad guy's looking at the model of Paris, which seems to be fairly accurate, and he's looking at the model, and they're going like he's going from there to there, but he's not going straight because he's in the Eiffel Tower. Montmartre is right there, but he goes to the Arc de Triomphe instead and comes back anyway. And at the end, I mean, the steps, when he falls down the steps again, it's like, wow, that's so good. It's ridiculous. And it never stops.
No,
it doesn't stop.
I thought
the scenes with the cars on the roundabout are so insane.
That was, it was great. I thought Donnie Yen was great too.
Who?
Donnie Yen, the blind guy.
He's fantastic. He's so great. So good. Really, really good.
He's so really stupid. Good. Would you watch it again?
Probably.
Cinema.
It's a bit long, but I would definitely watch it again. Some point. I think it's rewatchable. Like, it's very rewatchable. It's just the length of it, maybe like.
It is rewatchable. There's just set piece, set piece. But
totally.
Where does action movie go? Where do action movies go from there?
Oh,
because
that's a good question.
Because everybody was rooting, or I certainly was rooting for him from the beginning. The setup of the first film, when you rewatch it, there's loads of little things where you're like, "This is so messed up." Was he really like And in the first film where they all attack him at the house, you're like, oh my god, what's going on? And I just, yeah, I don't know if it would work, and it
You
doesn't
don't know if
seem
what will work. Sorry,
I don't know if the action genre is just gonna if it's gonna spawn loads of other nonsense that just try and rips off
probably.
John Wick.
I mean, it's happened before. It'll happen.
It
again.
won't be as good, but
Yeah, but there's also some formula that doesn't really change, and you just do the same thing again, and it works, and it's enjoyable. I mean, John Wick doesn't invent anything new; it just mixes a bunch of stuff and does it very well.
Yeah.
I think
Such like I don't. Now, is there going to be a John Wick 5?
Well, apparently there's some rumors. So I thought
Really?
that they were setting up the spin-off, but it's worked. That I saw some headlines saying that this is making so much money that they're trying to convince Keanu Reeves to make a fifth one. Of course. I don't know what they're going to come with, or like in terms of story, because this is completely getting really silly. But
Yeah, I don't know.
like at some point you got to put an end to this thing. I mean, you don't have to, but it's getting really. I mean, it's already silly at this point. I think the plot doesn't make any sense for the fourth one. Of course, it doesn't. To the end, that's why the end of the third and the third one I thought was disappointing, because you're like, I don't understand where this is going anymore.
I did read a fan theory about the John Wick films being representative of the stages of grief, which I thought would have been really cool if it actually followed that. But of course, when you make a film, you don't know if it's going to work. And clearly, the first one, they made a film that they loved to make, and they didn't know it turned out to be this massive sleeper hit. So then, like, okay, we'll do another one. So it's how much of life goes that way, where you just roll with it, and
most of it,
it's a balance of like taking advantage of all the opportunities you can and reworking.
Circling back to the cicada and the ants, you can't plan for everything, and so there's got to be a little bit of spontaneity. But while it's not spontaneous, this is just wow, this is working really well. Let's do more of it and make more money. So, well, they had already announced a spinoff. Oh, the scenes in the nightclub in Germany and that character were also fantastic. I mean, it was all really great.
Who was that character? I just like, who played that? Who was that? I don't
know, but he was huge. And when he started fighting, I was like, wow, I did not expect to see him fight like that.
No, but I have
just some roundhouse kicks, and you're like, wow, that guy's gigantic. I don't think I would want to have that kick in my face at all. I wouldn't want
spinning back kicks and whatever. But I did read something. I don't know how I ended up reading this, but the sumo wrestlers are really, really flexible. You wouldn't think it, right? But
I think they are. But they're
pictures of sumo wrestlers, like they're really heavy, but they're like they do the splits. They keep themselves like they got really massive hip strength, all that kind of stuff. So when I did see him spinning around like that, I was like, well, I'm not that surprised. But I want to know who that guy was. I meant to look it up and didn't. It's like it looked like someone with massive amounts of prosthetics on.
Yes, he did. He probably did. Yeah.
But the card game as well, the tension in that scene was
so good,
absolutely superb. And I did think, like, he's going to use the card, isn't he? And he did 5 2s. What? I want to rewatch that whole scene again.
It was fantastic. He was very entertaining. He was very funny, really, and he was laughing at the same time. Yeah, you knew the whole thing was ridiculous, but it was great. Very good.
Yeah, and it was
the only thing that was
the club scene in the first one,
perhaps slightly underutilized or felt a little bit strange in the whole plot, is the tracker with his dog.
Yeah.
Because at the end you're like, well, you showed up and they built you up for 2.5 hours as a very smart background character willing to sacrifice a lot for money. And then all of a sudden, because you did a kindness to your dog, you're like just having a beer by the side, which is kind of entertaining, but doesn't fit with what you build up the character to be for 2.5 hours. Or you don't know, but you're like, well, that's kind of a little bit.
Or
I enjoyed all the scenes with him, but then you're like kind of strange. And maybe
there was no payoff to him.
Yeah, so it feels like
it could set up a spin-off. He'd be a good character to explore.
Yeah, he was a great actor and a great character. It just feels you're like, well, that's it. You're just having a beer on a bench and watching them. I mean, why not? But
Yeah.
We said we would spoil it, so it's okay, I guess.
Oh yeah, we've massively spoiled it for whoever's watching, but
I really enjoyed it. I really, really, really enjoyed it.
I was
It a
hoping
lot
you
of
would,
fun.
because when I messaged you, I wasn't sure if you would. So I was really happy when I got your WhatsApp saying that you loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really enjoyed it. That would have been nice to see it with somebody, but it's cool to talk about it with you, so it's all right.
Well,
I decided to just go ahead.
IMAX.
I thought, am I going to text some friends? And sometimes I don't know who's going to be available. I have a few friends that are, you never know, they could be, but it's also just as fast to just go.
Yeah, it was totally worth it, and I'd kind of watch it again. And there are some moves from a technical martial arts point of view. I'm like, that's ridiculous how he does that.
Totally.
There's just, and the nunchuck thing in the Japanese.
Still can't get over it. I mean, this is in all the movies, the guns and the gun fu fighting, and you're like, how many times are you shooting people at like just this range in the face, and nobody's dying, nobody seems to have any kind of injuries or anything. It just, and I love that they said, they all would just say that they all have magic suits that are super armor like. I'm like, great, sure.
But they don't, their heads don't explode. It's like a perfect shot to the head. It's not like everywhere. Although occasionally there's a couple of things with the blood splatter going on the camera.
Yes, where it should all be like that, given the amount of gunfight, the gun.
And then he runs out of bullets and then throws the gun at them.
Yes, I love it. It's very, very good. Very good. My brother's really looking forward to seeing it. I don't know if my sister's seen it. To call her.
There was the axe throwing was that in the third one? It was in the third one. Where he just.
I should watch the second and third again.
Throws an axe and the belt just ends up in someone's head.
I've been talking about seeing the second and third with my girlfriend. She saw the first, but it seemed to be a lot more enthusiastic about them than she is. She's happy to have seen it and happy that I'm happy to watch them. Well,
I'm proud of the fact that both Davina and I sat there and enjoyed it, and that she didn't fall asleep. Although it would have been really difficult to fall asleep in something like John Wick 4.
Yeah. Well,
we
yes,
both loved it.
Yes, absolutely. It would have been kind of difficult to fall asleep.
I'd be worried if she fell asleep. Be really worried.
And I'm looking forward to Super Mario. I am quite optimistic about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fan service, but I think it's still going to be a lot of fun. Well, the trailer, they're integrating everything, and they're trying to do it really well. With the modern thing of having the main character seems like a bit ironic and incredulous about what kind of world have I fallen into, which I think is probably fair.
Rainbow Road made an appearance in the trailer, which I thought was very cool.
I am looking forward to it. I think it's going to be cool, and they're putting hints from all the video games. Luigi's going to have a haunted mansion and be worried and afraid at a bunch of stuff. Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch is fantastic, by the way. Which you said, we were going to talk about the meditation app in a second as well. And then Dungeons and Dragons, I'm cautiously optimistic. It's getting some good reviews, apparently, from the initial reviews.
I've seen some teasers, and it looks like a lot of fun, but I don't know. A bit like Mario, like is it just about him rescuing the princess, or?
Oh, it seems to be, and there's tons of fan service, as in there's tons of hints of all the classic monsters from the Monster Manual of Dungeons and Dragons in there. So it seems that they've done a better job than any previous attempt at fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons. And we'll see. I don't know.
Hero's journey with humor. We saw
and a lot of hints at like fun stuff that happens to adventurers. We'll see. I'm optimistic about it. I have more doubts from the trailer, but I saw some headlines saying it was really good. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll go and see that one. I wouldn't mind seeing it. It looks like a fun film.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun.
Have you got the latest Mario Kart?
The one on the Switch?
Yeah.
Yes, it might be at my brother's. I haven't played it in a while because I handed it
to my brother.
Getting? Oh yes, of course it's worth getting. It's awesome. It's so good. It's fantastic. Yeah,
Okay.
but I've never been. I mean, I really like it, but I'm not a massive fan. Which you're reminding me, I've been meaning to organize a game player night because I don't have any. I was going to say I don't have any friends. It's not true. I have friends. I don't readily, and it's probably an age thing too, readily have a few mates to invite to do 4-player games.
Yeah.
My girlfriend's doesn't really care.
I'm waiting for Bomberman. Bomberman is the one I want to get for sure.
But you should
I love
definitely
that
get
game.
Mario Kart. Bomberman I used to play a lot, yeah. It was a lot of
I
fun.
love that game so much.
I think my mother left and it's just coming back. I just need to struggle with the door. Wait a second.
Okay. So while Willem's gone, computer games on the Switch. Recommendations needed for me. Uh-oh. That doesn't sound good. Something about a key. But yeah, new computer games. Give me some recommendations. That's what I want to know. Especially cheap.
Oui, mais je te dis, il est difficile à ouvrir cette porte. C'est pas grave, je te apprendrai.
The key. I heard something.
Sorry, that was
That's all right. Yeah, I think we should set up next week rather than get too far into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we didn't cover everything we wanted to cover. But
no, we went on a massive tangent, as I tend to do, of course. A lot more serious conversation than we usually have. So I don't know if that was interesting or not, but it doesn't matter. I hope it was interesting to you.
Remember, it's always interesting to me. It's useful because it's got me thinking about, well, what's that inevitable question? What's my place in all of this? And we did say we were going to talk about the future. Maybe by next week, will you have, or by next, are we not speaking? Are we speaking next week? I'm not going to be able to actually.
No,
it is Easter Sunday.
Weekends might be a bit complicated. I mean, I could. I can. I don't have anything planned, so
I can't. I know that much. So this my cousin.
I might not be able to the following week.
Okay. Well, whenever we speak next, I think we should. Maybe we could make sure we'd have seen Dungeons and Dragons by that point.
When is it coming out? Isn't it coming out in May?
Oh, really? I thought it was coming out like much sooner.
Maybe I can't remember.
I thought it was like the next thing. Honor Among Thieves.
In France, it's coming out 12th of April. No, it's very soon. Sorry.
It's out. It's already out. 31st of March, UK.
No, here it comes out in 10 days.
Okay, so maybe we can have watched it. So we might talk about that. I think I'm going to try and persuade Davina to come watch it. We'll talk about AI and we'll talk about Sam Harris, whose voice has really grown on me.
I'm really glad you're enjoying the app. I really like it, and I've been using it for 5 years.
I've jumped.
Now.
I've bought it, and I'm going to continue using it. And the thing that I really, really like, and part of the reason I'd highly recommend it if you're this way inclined, is the theory.
Oh, it's so good. There's so much content. So much content.
So meditate, and then here's a theory behind why meditate, and then I like that. And that's only on
the quality of the podcast conversations with a number of monks, priests, therapists, meditation teachers of all sorts of traditions is super interesting. Inquiring into the mind, into consciousness from a practical standpoint. How does it feel to feel like you? Or sometimes scientific standpoint. The whole collection of Alan Watts is awesome, which I'm listening my way through.
Did you just try not to swear?
Sorry. Yes, I did. I did. Well, I stopped myself. I stopped myself from swearing.
It was very funny.
But yes, the theories and I don't even listen to that much of the theory. Sometimes I have bouts of it, but there's so much, and there's all sorts of, and they're always improving the features. They're looking at how to improve it, to add things, and discussing things with the community of people using it. And it's a very good. I really like it. So I think it's a fantastic product, and I think it's a lot better than Headspace or Calm, that are made as very commercial products. This one is commercial, but I like his approach, and he's building it, and I think it's successful because of the way it's built together.
I do like it a lot. So we'll talk about a bit more about that next time. So Until
And
then,
I have to say, I like his voice for meditation.
yeah, I like his voice too. He sounds clear, intellectual, and like he's really thought about what he's saying.
Yeah.
I think that's how I describe it. So yeah, until next time, keep
Thank
creating
you.
your future. Keep playing baseball on a
Oh yeah, we have to
American
talk about
football field.
the new roller coaster in Parc Astérix as well.
What?
Although I
What's
won't
that?
have done it. There's a brand new roller coaster, and I just saw the review because it's opening next week, and they had their PR day, and some of my theme park YouTubers went, and there's a second of a kind brand new roller coaster in the theme park of Astérix next to Paris, and it looks amazing. And the reviews are like out of this world. That apparently
I didn't know there was an Asterix theme park.
Oh, it's awesome. It's just outside Paris. We should go. It's so good. I went last year and I hadn't been in many, many years. They have 5 or 6 or 7 really good roller coasters. 3, two plus this new one. This new one looks really, really, really amazing.
Because I love Asterix. I read, I had my cousin had a load of them, and I got.
It's a great theme park. It's very French on the. It's very cool.
I read all of them, but the translations to English work really well. They're actually really funny, and very subtle in some of the humor.
It's a very good theme park, and they have if you want to plan for that, their Halloween events is amazing.
Oh, you got me thinking now. Okay. Well, on that note,
yeah.
Well, pause that, and we'll talk.